It's podcadzo.
That's a little director's trick, Julian, for syncing sound. I don't know if you knew about that because of fucking how dumb you are. What's up? Welcome to podcadzo.
I am pretty stupid. I don't really have a response to that.
Let's address the elephant in the room, which is your fucking hair, dude.
That's not an elephant in the room.
I know, we talked about it earlier.
Fucking.
I know. I'm just thinking the viewers might think it's
The viewers, as in
alarming.
nobody.
I think we're up to like 20 views, dude.
Really?
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. Yeah, whoever can't handle change, fuck you. Get used to it. My hair's short now. Fuck you. That's all I got to say.
I like it.
Thanks.
We kind of look more similar now.
Yeah,
Like
we both look like
band.
every white guy ever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit.
You look like that white guy from like the UK, like Europe, trash.
Yeah. Euro trash.
I look like that kind of white guy that's like
I usually go for football hooligan.
football hooligan.
Yeah.
Do you like football?
Like American football?
No, like UK football.
UK. Yeah. I've followed the Premier League.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you follow the Premier League, of course you do.
Yeah. Because I like the fucking.
You like the winners.
Flash. Yeah.
You like the teams that win
I like
games.
Manchester City. I actually do like Manchester City, but only because Nolan Liam Gallagher like Manchester City. So that's why I do. It's not even because I fucking
You don't
win
even like
games,
them
dude. I
because
kind of
of the
wish.
sport.
I kind of wish Man City would lose just so it's cooler to like them.
You fucking hipster.
More
piece of
adversity.
shit. You're a piece of garbage. You know that?
Well, because they're like dominating the Premier League now.
No.
And
I watch monster trucks.
monster trucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, Premier League's pretty fucking stupid. They're all owned by Saudi Arabian princes and stuff.
Oil.
And
Big oil.
Sponsored by airlines and.
Also, fuck the monarchy.
How dare you?
I'm just fuck the monarchy.
I like the monarchy.
You like the celebness of the royalty drama.
Yep.
Fucking
I-
classic.
It's comforting to me.
You like what she wore?
I've
that
been
one
to-
thing that one time.
Buckingham Palace before, dude, so it's different for me, okay?
How many times?
I've been to Buckingham Palace twice, actually. But I was
so you're basically a regular.
I was inside the palace at one point. I infiltrated it.
Did you fuck the queen?
Mm-hmm.
You had sex with the queen?
Yeah. Did I ever tell you that story? When I was playing hockey, we were in Canada. I was probably like 10, and I had this crazy coach at the time. And we were getting killed by these Canadian kids. And during one of the intermissions, he was like, "You got to get in their head. You guys got to do it. Go up to them and say, 'I fucked the queen.'" You're like 10 years old. None
Did
of
it
us
work
knew.
though? Did you get in their heads?
I don't think so.
Did you
I
say
think
that
we
you fucked the
lost.
queen?
I think I did. I fucked
Nice.
the queen.
That's a good guy right there. We should have all been able to have our turn with the queen if she's for the people.
Oh my god, it's so rough to say have our turn. That's so horrible.
Yeah, well, she's dead now.
Rest
so,
in peace.
yeah, she can't do anything about it.
Have you read that Flea book yet?
No,
Are you gonna read it?
no.
It's kind of a nice gift I gave you, and we're gonna pod on it. So
Yeah, shit. I am gonna read it. I have a kind of good excuse.
you can't read.
I have to do audiobooks. So there's that, sure. But besides that, I started reading the Bono book.
Oh, Surrender.
Mm-hmm. Which
it good?
you can, if you want, you can use my copy when I'm done.
Yeah,
with
when
it.
you're done, I'd love to read that.
It's a very Bono-y book.
Yeah.
Like, you
That's
can
what I've
tell
heard.
it was written by Bono. It's not bad, though. It's entertaining. I think it's very interesting how much because without any spoilers, the book is like it's like framed as if he's like discussing the songs or whatever, the 40 songs.
Right.
But he really does, he doesn't talk about the songs really at all. It's more so just about like what he was doing. He talks a lot about like meeting his wife, meeting, the band, jamming with them. I'm still pretty early in, but like there's not very much discussion of the actual like songs or the content of the songs or like the lyrics of the songs. I think but they're more just like guides of like the timeline of how everything kind of happened.
Right.
So definitely more like perhaps autobiographical than I thought it was, but it's like
That's what I wanted, though.
yeah,
I
it's
wanted
good.
him to talk about himself. When I heard it
He
was like
definitely
about
doesn't
the
struggle to do
yeah.
that.
I'm one of the rare people who loves listening to Bono talk about himself.
No, I mean I love the book. I think it's very funny, and like when I'm reading it, like his voice is in my head because he wrote it so well that it's like, yeah, this is definitely fucking Bono.
Julian, I'm fucking Bono.
I'm Bono. Got a big head. That's
I'm writing
British.
a song about an octopus. Doing straight Beatles.
That's going Ringo. All right.
Well, what are we talking about today, brother?
All right. So today we're talking about something. Well, I feel like we should stop saying this because we only talk about shit that we want to talk about. But we both really wanted to talk about this.
We are once again talking about something we want to talk about.
Something near and dear to your heart, and then something also near and dear to my heart. Something that we share as a collective, as a group. But I think this episode's interesting because you've got a lot of area of expertise on one half of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think we kind of share some area of expertise on the second half of it. So
So we're talking about REM is one half
Radiohead,
of it, and
baby.
Radiohead, but we couldn't tackle all of Radiohead, so we're focusing on Radiohead in the 90s. So OK Computer and
the Bends.
And the Bends.
We're not talking about Pablo Honey.
You don't want to talk about Pablo Honey?
Well, we can. I'm not talking.
I almost think we should talk primarily about Pablo Honey and the Bends. I think OK Computer might deserve a dedicated episode, perhaps, or at least more time. I don't know. We can see once we get
more time. But I think we should touch on it a little bit.
Why do we do? We've had this on the docket for a little bit, so I don't remember why we chose to do REM and Radiohead in one ep.
So we originally were gonna talk about REM because we've been on the '90s thing for a little bit, and like early 2000s, mid 2000s, but most of the stuff we've talked about lately kind of starts in the 90s or like has its peak in the 90s. And so I think we were thinking along those lines of bands that we really fucking like that either shaped the 90s and or had something happen in the 90s that shapes shit after the 90s. And you really want to talk about REM, and I am like kind of into REM. I don't know them super well. Disappointingly probably for like my dad's sake and shit, because like everyone I know likes REM.
Dude,
I grew up with
dads
REM.
love REM, especially. That's how I got into it.
And a lot of like musicians that I like obviously like REM, but I never really got super into them. And then because of that, we were thinking other bands in the 90s that were super important to the culture movement and the shift of like where pop was going, Brit pop, pop rock, all like alternative mainstream music. And Radiohead's just like obvious when you're talking about that because, you know, they have the Bends, which I think the Bends fits perfectly into like the 90s like kind of categories of music that we've been talking about, and is also like very on its own like influential.
And then did we bring up Radiohead in the Britpop episode? Because I know we talked about this separately. Like, is Radiohead Britpop?
That I think that's kind of what we mentioned in the Britpop episode is the Bends specifically like Britpop because it came at the same time. It has a lot of similar characteristics, but it's kind of just like a little bit more so, like a little bit out of the element for like all the other Britpop. But then so we put out that episode, and I was just like skipping through it kind of because it'd been so long. I wanted to just remember what my dumbass said. And I mentioned at some point in that episode saying that I don't think OK Computer is I don't think the Bends is considered Britpop. I don't consider it as such. I don't know if people do or not. So I Googled that, and lo and behold, I'm a fucking dumbass, and like it's revered by like critics and such writers as like one of the biggest Britpop albums to ever be written, and it's super important for Britpop and all this shit.
I don't think. I was thinking about it, and the way I look at it now is that Radiohead would have survived and done their thing, and probably would have done the Bends without Britpop being there. Whereas a lot of the other Britpop bands would not have had careers if it weren't for the Britpop movement. And I think it's just purely coincidental, and they were just like victims of the time they were in, that the Bends got grouped into the whole Britpop thing.
think I kind of disagree with that.
Really?
A little bit. I think something like similar to the Bends would have come out, but I think it would have been perhaps like less guitar driven and like less anxiety driven if it wasn't for Britpop that came out before it, or even like maybe grunge. But like
It's true.
I don't know. I think
I mean, I guess you can't help being influenced by what's around you, and they were
and they
living
went
in-
straight from
'Cause what year
doing
was the
that in the
Bends?
90s to like the bleep bloops and shit like in 2000 and 2001 with like
Yeah.
Carrie and Amnesiac. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's just one of those things where
Is OK Computer Britpop then?
I don't know. Let's see what the internet says. Because so to be honest, like
Because I could see. Well, let's get right in. What album, if you had to pick one, do you like better? Do you like OK Computer or the Bends better?
OK Computer or the Bends?
Yeah,
Definitely OK Computer.
yeah, I'm with you.
And I think everyone loves OK Computer more than the Bends, I would say.
Yeah,
And that's not to say that the Bends is like bad. I love the Bends. I think my dad has told me a few times that the Bends is like his favorite Radiohead album because he just has the feelings attached to it the most because it's like the first one.
yeah,
But like I think I don't know. OK Computer is more important. I think that like you can love both of them, but say that one is definitively more like influential and culturally significant than the other. And I think
just
that's
like
what
critically
OK Computer is.
revered.
Yeah.
Like I think pretty much everyone at Pitchfork, if they were hard pressed, would have to call OK Computer the
Like the
best
best
album
one.
of all time.
Yeah. Which I think it's interesting too. That album is one of the few that I think is like culturally revered and also like socially revered at the same time. Like the critics love it, the people love it. Not too many are like that, and it's just kind of interesting because it's held up for so long. No one's like sick of it yet. It's still referred to and shit, and like everyone loves it. But the internet says
So the UK was still in the throes of Britpop.
that's not really an answer.
I know. While you're looking through that, just while we're on the topic of both Britpop and Radiohead, we didn't talk about this in the Britpop episode, but there's a lot of great Noel Gallagher quips about Radiohead. I think he felt, I think he ultimately likes Radiohead and respects them a lot, and I think he probably felt like threatened that because as big as an Oasis fan as I am, like none of their work gets as close to OK Computer.
No.
And there's this Noel Gallagher quote that was like, Tom York could take a shit and Enemy would give it like 9 out of 10 stars. So I think he was quite. So this rates.
This is a Pitchfork 50 greatest Britpop albums, and the Bends is
And
on
the
it.
Bends beats What's the Story, Morning Glory.
And OK
Oh, it's cool that
Computer's
Pulp is the first one.
not
I
on
like
it.
that. Do you like Pulp at all? We didn't really talk about Pulp that much.
Yeah, I do like Pulp, and I don't know them super well, but I really like this guy.
Jarvis Cocker.
Yeah.
Jarvis Cocker's the man. He's a big influence of mine.
So I would say, just based on this list, they do not view OK Computer as
Britpop.
Britpop overall.
Because where I was going with that was like in the Radiohead canon, you could kind of view Pablo Honey to Benz to OK Computer like being their real guitar based days, and OK Computer was like the pinnacle of that. And after that, they wisely were like, we're not gonna be OK Computer. Let's go to the bleep bloops and weird drum beats and do like. It's amazing how well they shifted to that and still like created amazing music.
Right, and I think Tom York. Well, I know Tom York was having a level of identity crisis through that, where he's like, I don't think they necessarily wanted to be making exactly the type of music they were making, or like I know some of the songs that wound up on OK Computer are like not songs they wanted like released, or they wanted them to be worked on more or whatever. So I think it's interesting that despite that like conflict among the band, like they put out something universally acclaimed.
Yeah.
And then immediately
Shifted to Kid
I
A.
think because they felt the level of acclaim that they did and didn't know how to deal with it, they were like, okay, now we're just going to do whatever the fuck we want.
I just watched this cool interview with Tom York where someone asked him what like Radiohead song he's most proud of, and he said How to Disappear Completely. And it's all about like his identity crisis. And this is a great segue because it was Michael Stipe who influenced that song.
Okay, tell me
from
that story.
R.E.M.
I don't know that story.
I hope I'm not mixing that up, but I'm almost positive it was Michael Stipe. Tom York was having a lot of trouble dealing with the success and the fame, and went to Michael Stipe, who I think was a friend and someone he admired. And Michael Stipe said something to the effect of, like, you have to kind of disappear completely, like lose your identity. Like, this isn't real. This isn't happening. And those are lyrics in the song. This isn't happening to me. So yeah, you should look up that video on YouTube. It's a good watch. But yeah, so Michael Stipe, R.E.M. Let's
Let's
put
talk
a
some
pin in
R.E.M.
Radiohead and then come back to that. So R.E.M. Is there a reason you're not like a huge R.E.M. head, or they never just like grabbed you too much, or you haven't put in the time with them, or I don't know, what is it?
I feel like I put in time with them. Like, I definitely tried. And I like them. It's not like I don't like them. I just never like... They're not one of my like favorites by any means.
Yeah.
I think the main thing is like... It's kind of just like... And you're going to get mad at me for saying this. But it's kind of just like 90s alternative to me. Like, it's not super different or like...
Even the 80s stuff?
Well, so I think the exception to all of it is Michael Stipe being like very good at storytelling and songwriting and like using his voice in very interesting ways. And so like, yeah, no, like, I mean, like, who am I to say Automatic for the People is like not a moving piece of work? Like, it's great, and like it's truly like a shapeshifter album for like everything afterwards.
Yeah.
Including a bunch of shit that I fucking love. So I appreciate it for that, and I love it for that, but I don't necessarily like... Yeah, I don't listen to it very much, and I do kind of get annoyed with it. I feel like if I listen to it for too long.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
That's when they started leaning into, like, the kind of mega pop thing, like, a little bit ironically, and, like, real hooky, formulaic songwriting. So I've always... been a huge fan of like Murmur. Their first album is probably my favorite album, and then their 80s stuff. And I feel the same way about 90s. Like it does just get kind of generic alternative 90s rock. And to step back, it took me a while to become like a bona fide R.E.M. head, because like I mentioned, my dad was really into R.E.M., as a lot of dads are. So it was like kind of omnipresent in my childhood. I just kind of viewed it as like boring rock, honestly. I remember Losing My Religion was one of the first songs on guitar I learned, because my dad would play it on mandolin, and you'd have me play it on guitar. It's only 2 chords, so it's really easy. So it wasn't... So I was like, familiar with R.E.M. I didn't hate them, but I was also like, R.E.M.'s kind of like a boring dad band. But then later on, I got into them, and it was actually because... when I got really into the Smiths and Johnny Marr, I heard Johnny Marr talking about how he was getting a lot of Peter Buck comparisons, who's the guitar player from R.E.M., and then vice versa. Peter Buck was getting a lot of Johnny Marr comparisons, which embarrassingly, I probably would have never drawn that connection if they didn't put it together. I mean, maybe, but like I viewed Johnny Marr in a different realm. I viewed like Peter Buck in more kind of like country influenced... chicken picking, almost guitar land, like jangly like Johnny Marr is, but not as melodic as he is. But it was like the fact that they did have a mutual respect for each other that was like, maybe I have overlooked like Peter Buck's guitar playing in R.E.M. as a whole. So after that, I went in with a whole new appreciation for them. And I wanted to rewatch this documentary before doing this episode, but I couldn't find it. I think like MTV did this good R.E.M. documentary that follows their whole career, and it was pretty interesting. Have you seen that?
I've seen bits and pieces of it.
Yeah. So
shout out to MTV. You guys were the fucking kings for a little bit.
Yeah, dude.
Giving us weird behind the scenes content.
I know, it was great. So yeah, and then also when I was a grunge head, should have been around the same time before I was into super into Johnny Marr. I learned about like the friendship that Kurt Cobain and Michael Stipe had, and obviously I was a big Nirvana fan. Then I was like, oh, if Kurt Cobain really likes R.E.M. and Michael Stipe, maybe they are cool. So yeah, I think I started listening then more seriously as well.
So we're still talking like late middle school, early high school.
Yeah, more like high school, middle school. I probably wouldn't have listened to any R.E.M. But I always liked when like Losing My Religion came on the radio, or The End of the World as We Know It. You know, those are like fun songs when you're a kid because they're catchy and kind of weird.
And they stay kind of in the zeitgeist forever.
They
like,
do, man. I remember so clearly March 13th, 2020. Like just that week is when I first started hearing about coronavirus stuff. And then that day my college got shut down and it seemed like everyone was freaking out. And I remember I went to lunch with some people that day, and then we were all talking about like, damn, this is actually crazy. And then afterwards I went to Trader Joe's to get some groceries, and it was like Armageddon in there. Like, you know, everyone was trying to stockpile shit. It was crazy. And they played End of the World over the sound system there.
Just to whip everyone into a little extra of a panic.
Yeah, I think they might have looped it. I feel like
That's
it went.
pretty
I feel like
fucking
they
cruel.
played it more than once. I could be wrong. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's End of the World. So yeah, big. Do you mind pulling up the REM Wikipedia? I want to see their discography so I don't misspeak. Okay, yeah. So, man, they were so good. Really, all those albums in the 80s I loved. So Murmur, like I said, their first album came out in 83. It's probably my favorite. Reckoning, When I've Spent Less Time With, but a good album in 84.
An album a year.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88. That is crazy. Wow. So yeah, so it goes Murmur, Reckoning, Fables of the Reconstruction, great album. Life's Rich Pageant, great album. Document, less familiar. Green, great album. So yeah, man, they killed it in the 80s. And then yeah, they really hit mainstream success with Out of Time and Automatic for the People, which were 91 and 92. So remember Out of Time is what my dad had a CD of in the car. He might have had Automatic for the People too, but we listened to this album a lot, like, I think, on road trips.
Yeah, this was the one that was always present in my house or whatever, if it was REM. And I think it's because it's like the turning point album kind of. It still sounds kind of like earlier REM, and it has like a lot of the characteristics of earlier REM, but it has definitely more of a like refined packaging to it, I guess I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And it also has like Losing My Religion, which was a #1 song for like how many weeks? It was like a record-breaking song, how long it was on the charts. But yeah, so I mean, essentially like this takes them from cult band status to like being huge.
Yeah. And cult band is they kind of like the way, and I think this documentary talks about it, is REM sort of invented like college rock, like cool cults, indie bands that like sophisticated college kids were into. And there was like them, Camper Van Beethoven, those sorts of bands. And like they come from Athens, Georgia, which is, I always thought was cool. Like, you know, kind of a weird town for like such a cool indie rock band to come from. Especially like, I think we just have a perception that like the South produces a certain type of music and a certain type of people. But yeah, Athens, notably like a college town, and that's where they came from. And I think Athens had like a pretty thriving music scene in the early 80s. But REM obviously came out as the champion. So yeah, formed in 1980 by drummer Bill Berry. Great name too.
Yeah.
formed while all the original members were in college. So the lineup was Bill Berry, Michael Stipe, Peter Buck, and what is the fourth member? God damn it. Do you have his name in here?
I don't.
I have to go to the wiki. Dead air. Main members. Mike Mills.
Mike Mills.
Which, yes. Okay. I've clocked that before that there's two. There's a BB and an MM in the band, which I think is cool. Yeah, so Mike Mills. Very talented dude. Good bass player.
Yeah, he was like, he did a bunch of shit, right? Yeah, keys.
Back
He
and
was,
vocals.
yeah.
I thought he would play mandolin sometimes, but I guess it was just Peter Buck.
I think.
I guess when Peter Buck would play mandolin, he would hop on guitar, maybe.
I don't want to make this up, but I think that Mike Mills was the dude who was like obsessed with the mandolin originally.
Yeah. I feel like I remember that.
Because he is like a multi-instrumentalist. He is known for playing a fuckload of different shit.
Did Bill Berry die? Did I make that up?
I'm pretty sure he's alive.
No, not Mike Mills. Bill Berry.
Bill Berry. I think, Bill Berry
Yeah.
is dead, unfortunately. No, he's alive.
Who died from? I feel like didn't someone die from? No. Oh, you know what I'm thinking of? Bill Berry he had like a crazy surgery. That's what it was. He had like some sort of tumor or something, but he made it through.
Good for him.
Yes.
I thought he was dead for sure.
Sorry, Bill Berry.
Weird.
Yeah. So yeah, that was and still is kind of the lineup. Like they kept the same lineup through all the important years, through the 80s and 90s and
yeah,
into the
they released a
aughts.
fucking album a year, so it's kind of no wonder that they wrapped it up in 2011.
Yeah.
They have a huge discography, and yeah, they like never fucking stopped. They were on the road all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They were like world class band, and like an album a year. And like in the 90s too, they did Automatic for the People in 92, and then the one after that was like a year later, right?
It was 91, 92, and then 94. Monster was in 94.
So yeah, that's pretty insane output.
Yeah, definitely prolific.
Good for
guys.
them.
Yeah, so Michael Stipe was like a real interesting character. I think people really latched on to Michael Stipe. And it's part of the reason the band is so successful. Obviously, because he's a talented guy and great lyrics and great vocalist. But I think the press really liked how weird he was and unconventional he was, and kind of was like, you know, not to sound mean, but kind of looked like he had AIDS and super
Not
skinny
to sound
and
like a dick.
super skinny and bald and
Yeah, he also didn't pull punches. Like he was very honest and like
yeah, for sure.
Sometimes like somewhat aggressive about like the state of the world.
Mm-hmm.
He took being a frontman like incredibly seriously. Some of the shit that I've listened to after the fact, like some of his post-career interviews and shit, like the amount of time he would spend thinking about words and writing words and like trying to make sure they were the right words for like each and every part of the song, it was just like, man, this guy really takes this shit seriously. Like it's a craft for sure.
For sure. Respect for the art. Yeah, so I don't really have much else to say about REM than that. Like, they were so prolific, and there's so many REM albums out there that it's really tough to like get a great understanding, like spend enough time with each one. Like I said, whenever I go back to REM, like I always just like, I'll just throw on Murmur again, and then I just listen to Murmur and the same albums I know.
But that's what everybody does.
Yeah.
You want to listen to the shit that you know, that you're comfortable with, and that you like.
Since we're doing a podcast, and since this is about REM, I'll talk about a different REM podcast. Have you heard about Are You Talking REM Re Me?
Mm.
It's It's with Adam
Is
Scott.
that the Adam Scott one?
Yeah.
I didn't know it was called that.
They first did a U2 one called "Are You Talking U2 to Me," and then after U2 they did REM. It was "Are You Talking REM Remy."
They talked about all the U2 they could possibly talk about.
Yeah, they went through every album, and then I think they had
Oh, that's
members
it.
of U2. Well, they did. They like each episode was an album, and then I think they did a whole episode for Rattle and Hum, or maybe two. One like for the movie too, and then they did. It was right around when Songs of Innocence was released, so they did a whole one for,
They're like,
for
we
that
should
one.
disband now because
Yeah.
U2's
It's
not
just
worth
going
talking
downhill.
about anymore.
But Are You Talking REM Read Me? Very good album. It's funny. I like it. Or album podcast.
Podcast.
Yeah.
The last thing I have here for REM really is Losing My Religion. Does it hold up or is it cringy now? Because I listened to it.
Think.
Okay.
Why is it cringy to you?
I cringe a little bit, but I don't think it's because of the song. I think it's just because of how fucking overplayed it is.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, look, I think you have a note to what I'm talking about. REM Michael Stipe saved Tom York from insanity.
Yeah.
That's probably same one. Okay, and he tried to save Kurt Cobain too. You know, him and Kurt Cobain had a real close friendship.
So this is the article where I basically pulled all these notes from up here. But so we'll skip through. We'll pretty much say Radiohead comes in to the fold. They enter in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
They have Pablo Honey come out in 95. And Pablo Honey is pretty forgettable. But when it came out, it was good. Like, people liked it, and it was a good
Creep.
like statement. Yeah, it has one of the biggest songs of all time on it. Definitely like an establishing album. I'm pretty sure they were very much so trying to figure out what they're going to do. And Radiohead wound up on a tour with REM in the mid 90s, and it was when Radiohead was very fresh into their career. And so by virtue of that, Tom York and Michael Stipe started just hanging out together. And Tom York was very much figuring out fame and how to deal with it. And I think he was the type of person to like reject the idea of fame to a certain extent. Like, he never liked the idea of being famous or popular, and it made him uncomfortable. And Michael Stipe by this time was already super fucking famous.
Wait, so Creep came out in 92?
Yeah, so Creep came out in 92, and I think this is a different version of Creep than what's on Pablo Honey. It's like the demo version.
Right, okay.
But yeah, at this time in the 90s, it's fair to say Tom York was like a sad boy.
Yep.
And Stipe had been a sad boy. I think he was kind of through it and coming out of it.
Yeah,
So
Stipe
very
in
much-
some ways kind of proto sad boy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was the OG. But yeah, this place was this part was interesting. Just talking about Tom York after a show got followed by a bunch of people, and he felt very out of his place, very uncomfortable by the fact that people would just like follow him around and like disconnect the fact he's a person from the performer. And so I think because of all that angst and because of the fact that they were around each other so much, Stipe really just adopted like the mentor kind of thing.
Yeah. Does it say how they met? Did Stipe just reach out to him or something?
I think they met on their first tour. Like,
Oh, they were playing together?
yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, gotcha.
It was really early in Radiohead's career, and I think Michael Stipe met Tom York when Tom York was like still in his early 20s, which is crazy to think about now because, I mean, Tom York is such a in himself just like influential, large figure that like, how's he have a mentor?
yeah, for sure.
Kind of. It's just like,
I know.
this dude seems like he should be mentoring all of us. Not that he was the one. Yeah. Anyway. So yeah, after the bends and after that like introduction, Stipe and Tom York become friends, and they remain friends like all the way up to this day. They're still very close. Tom York, I think, has multiple times kind of accredited all of his like ability to stay successful to Michael Stipe. And so yeah, they come on the Benz in 1997. And I mean, so I guess I wanted to mention the Benz just because, yeah, we kind of have talked about it a little bit, just as far as where it fits, but we never really like talked about it as an album. I think as far as like the 90s, like Britpop / alternative rock thing kind of went, like the Benz is probably my favorite one of those albums.
Yeah.
It's very like, I think it's a very good indicator of where Radiohead was going to go. Like they're trying to do some unconventional songwriting ideas and take different approaches already, but they were still like very guitar based, very like melody driven hooks and choruses and shit like that. So
Yeah. I think the Benz is where Johnny Greenwood starts to like become Johnny Greenwood a little bit. And OK Computer is like him taking the guitar as far as like anyone could take it with an alternative rock. So yeah, Pablo Honey's kind of just like, it's, you know, an album. It's something they did. It's their first album, as Creep, obviously, as we talked about. But I was just listening to Creep, and Creep is cool because of the weird, like, arpeggiated melody that Johnny Greenwood picks over just the basic G, A, B, C chord structure. So I think like there's Johnny Greenwood even in Pablo Honey. But anyways, the Benz is probably the Radiohead album I've spent the most time with, even more than OK Computer, because it was the first one, for whatever reason, I got really into, and I got it on vinyl when I was a kid and first had a record player. So I was playing the Benz like several times a week all the way through, listening to it.
I had a phase like that too when I kind of first got super into Radiohead, where it was like, yeah, the Benz was on maybe not every day, but every other day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I definitely, like, if I had to pick one album to listen to for the rest of the time, it'd probably be OK Computer over the Benz, like I said. But like, I really, obviously OK Computer couldn't happen without the Benz. But I think there's there are some songs where I would confuse if it's on the Benz or on OK Computer.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah, like I feel like especially the second half of the Benz, there's like the song Just.
Yeah, Just is.
Which is very like OK Computer-y. And then there's like Street Spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Parenthetical fade away. Have you seen the music video for Just?
Yeah.
And it ends with all them laying on the street.
They're all just dead.
Yeah. I think about that music video a lot.
I think the thing that's interesting about, like, I think the amount of separation, and this is to your point, like the amount of separation that there is between like the Benz and OK Computer from like a discussion standpoint is interesting because they're very similar albums, and I think that the Benz is very much like OK Computer Part 1 kind of in the trajectory of their discography. Yeah. I think it makes total sense like how they ended up at OK Computer if you listen to the Benz first. And I think that the Benz also has a lot of like kind of not necessarily like production experimentation, but maybe just like songwriting experimentation in the sense that it was like it's their second album, so they have to like make a album where every song is like tits on, because second albums are very like the critical reception to second albums is just a lot like harsher than to most other albums that bands release. And so I think when they got to OK Computer and it was their third album, they had kind of put themselves down as like an important band.
Yeah,
That they were
earned
like
a lot of credibility with the bands.
Yep,
Yeah,
they were a lot more fearless on that and a lot more committed to taking things as far as they could within the genre.
There's that saying about second albums that like sophomore albums are so hard for bands because you have your entire life to write the first album and then a year to write the second one.
2 years tops.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. I think by the time Pablo Honey was out, they were already working on the Bends.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is they wound up on like a huge record label working a huge deal by the time the Bends came out. And then OK Computer, the record labels were just like, you do whatever you need. Yeah. So that definitely worked in their favor too, I would say. But as far as the Bends goes, I guess I didn't have anything specific to mention other than just, the fact that it's really good and that it fits super snugly into multiple different pockets of kind of different things that we're talking about, be it grunge or 90s alternative or Britpop. It really is like kind of seminal in all those different genres.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of albums that are like that, so it's pretty important.
Very true. Very true. Do you mind pulling up the track listing for Bends?
We got Planet Telex is the first one.
Uh-huh.
I should have not just Googled the Bends. And then the Bends is the second one.
Baby's got the Bends. Yeah, and there's it has
these
I think
not
Fake
in
Plastic
order?
Trees is another one that could.
Yeah, Fake Plastic Trees was definitely huge as far as like radio play and I think like pop culture influence. Like they had a video for that song that was on MTV all the time.
Yeah, great music video.
It was like on the radio everywhere. It was a single, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely one of their most like listenable, straightforward, like just kind of pretty light songs.
And High and Dry
High and Dry too.
Great song.
And then
My Iron Long.
Nice Dream is a very good song.
It is. Man, what a solid track listing. Banger after banger.
Yeah, and like, I don't know, just every song kind of 11 out of 10 on performance and production.
Yeah. Man. Yeah, they were definitely on a different tip in the 90s, Radiohead was.
Yeah.
Well, their whole career, but I'm going to listen to the Bends tonight.
And
That's my
then,
plan.
listen to it on the drive home.
Yeah.
I was listening to it when I was driving last week, and I was like, holy shit, this goes harder than I remember.
Have you been watching the Nuggies at all?
No. I've been
basketball dude.
hearing about it because it's what everyone's talking about, but I haven't been paying attention to it, so.
Yeah.
Are you a basketball guy?
Not really. Pretty casual. I've been watching the Nuggets.
This was just a Pitchfork article about a bunch of famous people talking about how important OK Computer is to them, and so I just
That's
thought
cool
this
that Danny
would be,
Brown is the first one.
Yeah, I thought it'd be
Danny
interesting
Brown.
because it proves how all over the spectrum their influence is, and how many people truly thought OK Computer was like a huge deal. So yeah, Danny Brown, which obviously doesn't make anything really like what OK Computer is, but
of all the biggest rappers today, though, if I had to pick one who was like really into Radiohead, I'd probably say Danny Brown probably is.
And then we got Ed Drost from Grizzly Bear.
Yep.
We got Maxwell, who's just like a fucking he's a guy. We got Lower Dens, Jana Hunter, John McLean, who
from the Beta Band.
Yeah.
I love the Beta Band.
dude, this guy is a genius.
Yeah.
Cillian Murphy.
Cool.
Will Butler, who is not Win Butler, so I think we're good to talk about him. Will Butler's not the creepy one.
Mm-hmm. What's up with Win Butler? Can you give me I've heard a little bit about
10-second
this.
synopsis.
Yeah.
He got Me Too'd for like taking advantage of, I don't remember if they were underage, but just women that he was like meeting at shows. Like he would take them backstage and be like, I'm Win Butler. creepy stuff, allegedly.
Troubling.
But yeah. Either way.
Yeah.
Baroness, which I don't know if you know who Baroness is, but
I'm just by name. I've never listened to Baroness.
they're fucking sick.
Yeah.
Like pretty heavy metal. Very like experimental metal. But yeah, I mean like John Baisley, he's definitely like influential now in his own right as far as like he's influencing kind of like the alt metal scene, so that's interesting too. DJ Shadow, who's another just like classic guy.
I love DJ Shadow.
Haley Joel Osment.
It was a very interesting list at Pitchfork.
Benjamin John Power. Chaz Bundick, who I think this guy isn't even American. I can't remember though.
Torby Moy.
DJ Spooky. But yeah, the list goes on and on and on. Grant Lightbody from Snow Patrol. Jimmy
Foles.
Smith. Richard Reed, also from Arcade Fire. Richard Reed Perry. Yeah, so I mean, that's just like, this is just a Pitchfork article to commemorate the OK Computer 20 year that happened a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's just super interesting. Like, there's not a lot of there's not a lot of albums that have that much of a reach where it's like dudes that were listening to like 90s rap and hip hop wound up liking it. People that were listening to like fucking hardcore and thrash metal from the 90s wound up really liking it. And like, I mean, to those people like Ed Dross, like, would there even be a Grizzly Bear if there was not a Radiohead first? It would be
a lot
very,
of
very
bands
different
without Radiohead, because we talk about post Nirvana a lot, but I think post Radiohead might be a more legitimate,
very real
thing.
Yeah.
I think Radiohead legitimized alternative rock and
experimentation. They made it okay to not necessarily just be conventional all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
They're not the first band to do that. There definitely are a lot of bands before them that was like the main MO, was just do unconventional stuff. But they're the first ones, I would say, that made it like universally accessible. Like everyone could grasp onto it and make sense out of it.
Yeah, totally. And it was listenable, I think, above all.
Yeah, lots of big radio songs on that.
Yeah.
Like, even some longer, for the radio, longer songs wound up making it just because, they were like good content through and through.
Totally. So, obviously...
Mazer, get the fuck down.
She's fine. Hi, Meiji. Hi, baby. Obviously, you've been a big Radiohead guy most of your life. Do you remember what your entry point with them was? Was it your dad who got you into Radiohead?
It was definitely my dad talking about them so much that made me like want to check them out for myself. The other thing about Radiohead when I was a kid was the aesthetic, and like the artwork was very unlike anything that I had seen before. So I think that pulled me in first. And weirdly enough, The King of Limbs was like my first true foray into Radiohead, where like The King of Limbs came out. The release fascinated me because they released it. So it was a surprise release. They didn't announce it. There was no like, here, like, we're putting out an album. It was just like, here's an album. And it was also on the Pay What You Want platform.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was very much just kind of like something that was, for me, was like a first. I hadn't ever really experienced anything from a release perspective like that before. So that fascinated me. I remember my dad playing it and hearing like Mr. Magpie and like Lotus Flower and kind of just being like pulled in immediately. Because they're both like, well, Magpie is kind of a traditional song, but Lotus Flower is just like, it's like an anti-song where it's just like everything that happens throughout it is unexpected and there's so many turns and changes, and the fact that it was all written on like loops and samples also fascinated me, because at that point in time I was very into that like loop and sample kind of idea. And so then from King of Limbs I was pretty much just hooked, and then I kind of just bounced around. I wound up having like a huge Hail to the Thief phase, obviously a huge In Rainbows phase, And then I kind of went back to 90s Radiohead after that. And the first time listening to, like, the Bends, I was just like, holy shit, this is so different. Like, I would have expected it to be, like, you know, a semblance of similarity. But when you start with the King of Limbs and then you go to the Bends, it's like, this is not the same band.
Yeah, that's cool.
So,
what year was King of Limbs?
2012.
2012.
Or 2011. It was one of those two. I think it might have been 2011. But it was, freshman year of high school. I think, if I remember correctly, it had come out in, like, the summer before. So I was listening to it a lot over the summer. And then I actually... This is a very weird memory that I have, but I failed sophomore year geometry, so I had to do summer school. And so I would ride my bike to school every day. The summer school was at Fort Collins High School, which is, like, pretty far away from my house for a bike ride.
For sure.
So I was biking there every day, and every day when I would bike there, I would put in a Radiohead album and then listen to Radiohead on the way back.
That's cool. That's a cool memory.
And that was when I had my true, like...
That's like me with Pearl Jam driving
discovery
to
phase
practice.
where I was just like, I mean, I remember listening to, like, the song Kid A for the first time in headphones while biking, and like I did not know what was happening around me. I was literally just focused on what I was listening to because I was just like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
This is nothing like I've ever heard before. And my Radiohead obsession phase went on for, like, years and years and years. Like, I mean, I don't know if it's over now. It's hard to tell, but I definitely don't listen to Radiohead, like, as much as I used to. It used to be, like, daily.
I remember associating
Radiohead
really heavily with you in high school.
I was, obsessed with their image and, like, their messaging, and I was obsessed with their songs. They were like the first band where I was just, like, all in for, like, years.
Yeah.
And I still think they're probably, like, the most important modern band, like, to exist. But it's like the Beatles and then Radiohead.
Yeah. There's to go back to the Smiths. I think it was it Pitchfork or it was one of those magazines that said the Smiths were the most influential
which is
indie band of all time.
Fucking bullshit.
As much as I love the Smiths, I can't believe that it's not Radiohead. They would give that to.
Radiohead.
But I think their argument was, I mean, Smiths obviously a lot earlier than Radiohead, and Smiths were probably influential on Radiohead.
Sure, but Radiohead changed the game. Like, and they did it multiple times. Like,
I think Enemy did it actually, not Pitchfork.
It sounds bullshitty enough to be Pitchfork.
Yeah.
So
well, also Enemy.
They weirdly like jerking fucking Morrissey off.
I do. Everyone does.
It's like that dude can
I would
say
like to also
the
Morrissey.
most, like, ridiculous, off the wall, inappropriate, incorrect
bordering
shit ever.
On racist.
And people will just be like, "Can you
Or
believe
not even
Morrissey
bordering.
said this? It's so crazy, dude." Anyway, Morrissey's cool. Like, it doesn't. Yeah. So, without turning this into a fuck Morrissey speech, I just want to say, Radiohead invented and perfected the name your price payment platform, which
with King of Limbs,
like every single with In Rainbows.
Oh, that's right. They did it on In Rainbows.
It was just very. That was back before streaming was really even. I mean, it wasn't a thing. It was like
was In Rainbows 07? Yeah.
So, and that's a platform that everybody uses now. The pay what you want. That's like Bandcamp's main thing. You can choose otherwise, but like it's very popular to see that now. They very much so popularized the idea of like the modern music video and like associating a music video to a single. Yeah, they're huge. They're like the most important. And Morrissey and the Smiths, they wrote some popular radio songs.
All right. We'll have a Smiths episode later.
I do love Morrissey. I can't lie. I love his solo work a lot.
That's good to hear.
But
that's cool.
I still think he's a fucking dickhead.
Yeah, well, he is. It's cool that you got in on King of Limbs. So that would have been King of Limbs being released 2011 would have been like right before I got super into Radiohead.
So it was like around the same time for both of us.
Yeah. But I got in only with the 90s stuff. I don't even think like I heard, like listened to, Kid A or In Rainbows all the way through until maybe like 4 or 5 years after being like a huge Radiohead fan, a huge Benz and OK Computer fan. I obviously heard some of the songs, was like familiar with the
So he took very
the albums were
opposite
out there.
approaches there.
Yeah. So it's funny that we're focusing on 90s Radiohead today because that was like my only focus with them for years.
And when I came back around to, I think it started with the Bends for sure because my dad had always talked about how much he liked the Bends. But the first time I heard OK Computer, I think that it became just an OK Computer party for like at least a couple weeks after that, where it was just like every
Same
time.
here. Yeah.
And I was like fascinated with the lore of it too because, and I have I have like the box set now. I got it as a gift, but Tom York had notebooks upon notebooks just full of drawings and lyrics and just shit, and Johnny Greenwood had cases full of cassettes that were just demos and sounds and all this weird shit. And so the lore behind all of it was fascinating too, and really trying to get into like the headspace of where they were when they made it. And I think that in a lot of ways that they like kind of adopted the mentalities and like ideas on OK Computer and kind of just like carried them through, and they're even still perfecting that now.
For sure.
But in a lot of ways too, it's just like that band conquered like alternative rock with OK Computer. They made it universally accessible and loved. And then they were like, okay, now we did that. Let's do it again, but with something completely different.
And OK Computer was at such a crucial point in alternative rock because it was coming so like played out and pastiche and cheesy. It was at such a crucial point where they were like, nope, alternative rock is a legitimate. This is high art.
Yeah.
You know, this is like we're taking this as far as we can. But I think to go back to it,
Mazer.
She had a lot of power. Part of the reason I was only listening to the 90s stuff for a while is because I was so like, then I was hungry for stuff like that I could emulate and like get inspiration from. And, you know, those are like guitar albums. I was like, this is like amazing guitar playing. This is what I want to do. Like those after OK Computer, I still like those songs, but they were like less accessible to me. I was like, I don't know what I can do with this. Like I can't draw inspiration from this as easily. Whereas now it's different. But then also that was just me as like looking for, you know, being into guitar. And then once I started getting into mixing music and all that stuff and went back and listened to OK Computer, the production on it is so insane. And that's what I go back for more now is just like, I love just putting on headphones and listening to the songs and all the crazy stuff they do. It's such a beautifully mixed and produced album.
Yeah, and the remastered one that they put out a few years ago, it makes it just like, I mean, it sounds like kind of
that's what I've been listening to lately. Yeah,
it's so good. It's interesting. I think it's cool that you mentioned kind of like getting into OK Computer first for like the accessibility of it, because it is like a super kind of experimental out there album, but you don't need anything besides standard instruments to like get there really.
Exactly.
Like maybe some pedals.
Yeah.
Maybe. But like it is super out there while still being very grounded in like the like traditional 4-piece, 5-piece band type setting. So that's also very interesting. I think it was also cool with like Ed O'Brien being in Radiohead. He's the first guy in a band that like focused full time on just making sounds.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it too.
I think Paranoid Android was the song I like really got obsessed with first, because it was like all the changes in it. It was like really mind blowing to me as a younger dude. Where I was like, wow, like this goes so many different places and there's all these crazy changes, but it's still like listenable and like structured in a cool way and it makes sense. And I think I was like really trying to emulate that sort of stuff back then.
You and everybody else.
Yeah,
I was doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, how can we write a 6-minute long like saga opus song that's not just repetitive as fuck
Yeah.
and boring.
And doesn't like it's not like jammy at
Yeah.
all. It's
No, it's not jammy. It's every single part of it is structured.
Yeah, every note is calculated. Yeah.
What's your favorite like not 90s Radiohead album?
Kid A, I'd say that's probably the one I've listened to the most, followed by In Rainbows. You mentioning King of Limbs is one I want to go back and listen to. We'll probably spend the least time with that one.
It's either you love it or you hate it.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd say Kid A.
Oh yeah. Okay.
What's yours?
I'd probably have to say, oh man, I'd probably have to say the King of Limbs, honestly, because apart from the fact that it's the one I've definitely listened to the most and I know the best, it's probably like the biggest like chance that they took as far as
that's cool.
release, musical approach, and it's the least like all the other ones. Like, I think when you listen to the King of Limbs, it's like this album sounds like this album and literally nothing else.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been listening to King of Limbs again. You know,
and all the singles that come around it are amazing too. Like, they have Super Collider and The Butcher, which are like two of the best Radiohead songs ever. And then there's like the Daily Mail, Staircase. Have you ever heard the song Staircase?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Fucking so... It might be like the best song they've ever written in some ways. But yeah, I think that was a peak in their career. And also adding a second drummer in 2012, they added Clive Deemer. And so now if they ever do shit again, like, I think the idea of the second drummer is a really good way to like keep things fresh.
For sure.
Yeah.
You've seen Radiohead live. Have you? No. Only The Smile.
Only The Smile. And I've seen Tom York solo. Yeah.
I've not seen anything. I want to go to that Smile show.
Probably the best show I've ever been to.
Yeah, dude, I love. We'll definitely have to do a Smile episode.
And they're in the studio working on another
album.
album.
I know. I'm so excited for that.
Yeah. Come on, Ed O'Brien. Quit being a bitch so we can get new Radiohead.
Yeah. Your solo stuff is not good.
It's not that great, bro.
Miami or whatever the fuck that album was called sucks.
Earth.
Was it called Earth? Why did I think Miami?
Earth.
Is there a song called
Miami's
Miami?
on Earth.
Yeah, sure.
There's Brazil.
Maybe
I think Brazil's the only
Earth,
one.
whatever.
I think it's called Earth.
Last thing I'll mention, just being a Johnny Greenwood head, he did a lot of soundtrack work after OK Computer.
Yeah.
And he did the soundtrack for one of my favorite movies, There Will Be Blood. Have you seen that?
Yes.
Music is amazing.
To be honest with you, I only watched that movie because Johnny Greenwood scored it.
Yeah.
Yep, but it's a fucking great movie.
Yeah.
Horrible, but pretty great.
Yeah. Shout outs to PTA for discovering or recognizing the genius that was Johnny Greenwood.
And didn't Tom York work with Paul Thomas Anderson too?
Yeah.
Or Paul Thomas Anderson did a couple of Radiohead music videos. Maybe that's what
yeah. I'll have to look back. I feel that maybe Johnny Greenwood looped Tom York into something he was scoring or something. Maybe. I'll have to look back.
PTA did the video for Daydreaming. And I think he did Burn the Witch too, which is like a claymation video.
Yeah, I remember that. Burn the Witch is cool.
Yeah. Do you remember when that came out as a single and you were just like,
yeah, I do remember that.
the hell is this?
I do. I remember that well.
They're good at that.
Yeah. That came on a lot on the Sirius XM rotation I was listening to at that point. Well, cool, brother. I don't know. Do you have anything else to talk about?
No, I think
I'm sure we'll revisit Radiohead at some point.
We'll have to do probably an In Rainbows episode.
Yeah, we'll do it a 2000s episode.
2000s Radiohead. And then we'll do 2010s Radiohead.
Yeah, 2010s.
And then we'll do the Smile. Then we'll do Tom York solo shit. Then we'll do Johnny Greenwood.
Then we'll do Johnny Greenwood / Paul Thomas Anderson movies.
And then, fuck, I forget the name. This doesn't have to go in the episode, but Johnny Greenwood's like doing a solo album or a joint album with some Israeli artist. and they've put out 2 singles, and they're both fucking fire.
Oh, sick. I want to check that out.
Dudu Tasa.
Dudu Tasa.
Yeah, he's like one of the biggest.
D-U-D-U or D-O-O?
D-U-D-U.
D-U, okay.
Yeah, he's one of the like most popular Israeli artists, I think.
That's a geography I've ignored largely for music, but I'll check that out. And
Very
that's
melodic.
not an anti-Semitic thing before people start saying that I haven't listened to
Colin
music
hates
from
the
Israel.
Jews. Colin hates the Jews. All right. Good so.
Goodbye. Thank you. No. Good sode. For real. Thanks to my guest today, Julian.
Thanks to my guest today, Colin.
Yeah. This is my outfit.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So,
I think I've...
This has been Podcadzo with Colin. My guest today was Julian. Thank you.